Let's begin with prayer. The Lord be with you. Good and gracious God, we thank you for this day. Direct us in all of our doings, and with your most gracious favor, further us with your continual help, that in all our works begun, continued, and ended in you, we may glorify your holy name, and finally, by your mercy, obtain everlasting life through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Welcome. This is the first time that we've done a webinar to kind of talk people through what the grant process is and what that looks like. So what I'm going to do is share my screen so that I'm going to show you the PowerPoint that I have, and we will give you all that PowerPoint, so you don't need to take screenshots or copy it down. And then once I get through that at the end, ask any questions that you have. So let me turn on my sharing of screen. For those of you that are on the phone, we're going to talk through everything, so don't worry about that. Let me, great. For those of you that are on the phone, we will share the PowerPoint presentation, so no worries about that. Just to begin with, I wanted to let you know in the last 2 years before this, what our grant process looked like. We've had anywhere from 75 to 108 grants submitted over the last 2 years. And of those, we were able to give 18 grants each of those years. Each year for this triennium, so for the 3 years of this triennium, each year we were awarding somewhere between $133,000. For this particular process, for 2018, we have $137 available to distribute. As you know, our discernment process and application form is already up and online. And we will make sure in the follow-up email to all of you that you have the links to those documents if you haven't found them yet. So that is already up and out there. We did that so that you had a longer time to really think through and to really understand what kind of a grant would be best for your ministry and discern, is now the time to ask, or is there going to be a better time for us to ask? So that is what the discernment process is about. The application form is there so that you can begin to fill that out and have people helping you with that along the way. January 2nd, our online application process will open. What that means is from January 2nd to February 2nd, you will submit your application online. What that means is you'll get there's going to be a form stack link, which is how we collect the applications. We will ask you some information on that form stack link, and then you will upload your application in either Word or a PDF. So some of the information that we ask you to enter on FormStack might be a little bit repetitive as to what is already in the application, but we need that in order to be able to sort you by diocese and province so that we make sure that our readers aren't reading people from their own province or people that they might know. So just wanted to let you know that's why you might think, why is this so repetitive? And that would be why. Over the month, during February and during the beginning of March, there is a group of folks and myself who read every single application. Every application is read at least 3 times. And once the reader has read the application, they grade it on a rubric. So if those of you that have been in school remember your teachers grading you on a rubric, did you follow the directions? That's not one of ours, but the rubric contains things like, did the budget make sense? Is this enough funding? That kind of thing, so that we can then, as a group, once all of the applications are read, we come back together as a group and discern and talk and read, not read, but think about all of the applications that we receive. And it takes us quite a while to do that. So by March, We will have discerned which grant applications we are going to recommend to Executive Council. And at the April Executive Council meeting, they will vote on those recommendations and ask us any questions that they may have about the grants that were submitted. Like I said, $137.38 is available for this particular academic year. There are leadership grants, which is in the frame of $20,000 to $30,000. And this particular grant, you'll get your money, but you can use it over a 2-year period, because the leadership grant is mostly to re-energize something, a ministry that's gone dormant, to establish a new one. So we know that a lot of times that takes a lot longer than a year. So we give you 2 years to kind of use that chunk of money that you were awarded. The other 3 grants are to be used in a 1-year period of time. There are campus ministry grants and young adult grants, and these are to really seed money for a new program, a new initiative, a leadership development, some new thing that you just need that seed money to push you forward. This year we added a category called project grants. So if you need a small amount of money to go do something, or you need a set of books for your Lenten Bible study, or you need whatever. So small amounts of money for a one-time project that will impact your ministry. So we're going to see how many of those we get. This is the first time we're doing that. But we had a couple of grants come in under the $3,000. So we kind of wanted to toy with that and see if there was a need for that kind of small grant. Grant discernment. When you go online and look at the discernment form, which is a downloadable document so that you can take this and do it with the people around you, we offered this for people last year because we realized just by reading some of the grants that they were written and only seen by really 1 or 2 people. You can just kind of tell that. And what we're really hoping is that people will use the community around them. That could be your board or vestry. It could be student ministers. It could be a student board. It could be advisors. It could be colleagues from your school or diocese. It could be colleagues that you know from your community. So gathering people together is the best way we all know to do discernment, to get people together to reflect, where is God calling us? What is something new that we are being called to do? And what does that look like? What kind of funding does that take, if it takes funding? We found last year in reflecting with a couple of people who did this process that they actually discovered, one of them in particular said, we're not ready to apply yet because we haven't fully done our discernment. And because once I talked to the bishop about the discernment process, this particular bishop said, well, how about I give you a little bit of money to start, and then next year you can apply. So the discernment process also gives you some time to talk to some key people. The grant process, the discernment process itself, invites you to spend some time reflecting, to gather together, to discern, to explore where God is calling you. It gives you some time to think about it and plan, right? So the discovery part is maybe who are other community folks we can get involved in this. If you're in a town with a few other churches, do you talk to them and see if they would be on board to help you with whatever your plan is? And then what I really encourage you to do is take some time and get some feedback. This feedback should be from people who have not read the grant yet, who don't yet kind of know what you're doing. So it's a fresh set of ears to listen to what you're thinking about. Feedback should also come from your bishop, because your bishop at the end will have to sign off on this plan. So if he or she knows up front that this is something you're thinking about, they may also be able to give you some feedback of, oh, well, this particular committee can also support you. or this group of people is working on it, so maybe they can, you guys can pair up together. So think about feedback not only on your writing and on your plan, but also it's a way of getting people on board and getting people to begin to support you. And then, of course, you have to plan it out and write it, and finally submit it by February 2nd. This is a lot of words right here. I'm not going to talk through it all because this is on the documents online and what we will send you. Just wanted to flag this to make sure that you know what the selection criteria is, and that is a part of the documentation online. So I just wanted to flag that. I've talked about a lot of this already. Selection preferences is also in the documents, but I wanted to highlight this because these are not like what the previous screen was, is make sure it's 5 pages, the nitty-gritty stuff. This is more about, as a group of folks that are reading the grants, these are the preferences we are looking for. So are you being collaborative? Part of where the church has been going for years is really breaking out of our silos and thinking about ways that we can engage the community around us. So is this a collaborative process? Are you bringing new learning into your community or the community around you? How are you preparing young adults for your leadership? If it's applicable, are you trying to reach out to people beyond sort of the typical ministry? Does it address the priorities of General Convention? Does it promote reconciliation, evangelism, and environmental stewardship? Obviously, your grant is not going to get all of these. I mean, you might get 1 or 2. But we wanted to let you know kind of this is the thinking and what we're looking for in a grant application. These particular preferences may or may not apply to the small grants, the project-based grants, and we know that. So just wanted to flag that for you as well. I came up with some grant writing tips, and some of these have to do particularly with our grant process, but if you are writing any grants, these tips are applicable. So first of all, read the application thoroughly and make notes, because you want to make sure that you are addressing exactly what the grant is asking for. You don't want to get halfway through writing it and realize, oh my gosh, I didn't realize it was asking for this particular thing. So make sure you know what it's asking. Understand what the desire is. We got a couple of grants last year that really didn't even have to do with young adult ministry. So make sure you understand what the grant is asking for and desiring. Make sure you tailor it to your subject. I know just from talking to some of my colleagues that the same group of folks have applied for different grants. So make sure if you're applying for our grant and the Roan Ridge grant, or maybe a UTO grant, that you really tailor it to the subject and to the particular grant that you are writing for. Obviously, you can cut and paste some of the informational documentation on your ministry and your hopes and dreams, but make sure you're really targeting it to your particular grant subject. Before you start writing, so this is kind of a going back to English 101, right? Like before you start really writing and getting into the nitty-gritty, make sure you know your end goals and communicate those goals well. It's really hard to read a grant and you know that there's some good stuff in there, but you can't quite put your finger on what's their end goal. Like what's the thing that they want to do? You don't want us to have to hunt for that. You don't want anyone to have to hunt for that. So make sure you know your end goals, communicate them well. You can even repeat yourself. This is a big one. Don't assume that your readers, the readers of the grants, know your ministry at all or the acronyms you use. We assume that everyone uses EYC for youth group, and that's not true. And not everyone knows what that means. That was just an example. So make sure that if you use acronyms to short your writing, that you at least define them first so that the readers understand what it is that you're talking about. If you have outside support from a diocese, from a congregation, if someone's giving you space, if someone's letting you use their copy machine, make sure that you state that. because what that tells us is you have other people who are supporting you. So make sure that you state that up front. Make sure it's reflected in your budget as well as an in-kind donation. Use the given format. The little picture that you see right there is the format, the first page, the summary page for our grant application. Make sure you use the format. Don't go crazy with the fonts and stuff. I know that totally seems like an old English teacher thing to say, but when we are reading application after application after application, when we have the same format, it's much easier for us to find the information we're looking for if things are laid out in a certain way, because we know where to go on the page to find it. So make sure you use the given format, tweak it if needed be, but don't tweak it just to be fancy, okay? Ask someone else to edit it and give feedback. So this could be someone who has nothing to do with your ministry, who isn't even in church, but you want someone to look at it, to read it, to edit it, and then say, I hear you asking for this, right? Is this really what you're asking for? Your summary paragraph says this. Is that true about what you're asking for? So ask someone really removed from the process to give you some editing help and some feedback. Be concise and clear. We ask for 5 pages for your grant process, and then you can add an additional 2 for your budget. The reason is we do have to read a lot of these. And the more concise and clear that you can be about the grant that you're writing, the more that it tells us that you know exactly what it is that you're being called to do, that you're really clear about what this new thing or what this new project might be. So make sure, be concise and clear as you can be. And if you need help with being concise and clear, ask those around you to help with that. We ask for a summary paragraph on the first page of the application. Make sure this is really a summary of your grant application. What we want there is, this is the grant title, and this is what we're going to do with it in a small paragraph. The reason we ask that is after you've read about 100 of them, I make notes and make all kinds of jot little things to myself when I'm reading them. But then once I'm shuffling through and they're all over my kitchen table, I want to just be able to read that paragraph to help me remember, oh yeah, that's that grant application. So I don't have to go back and reread the entire thing. It also helps you be very clear about what it is that you're asking for. We do ask for a budget. Be clear about what it is you're asking for. Be realistic about it. Don't underestimate what it's going to cost, and don't way overestimate what it's going to cost. Make sure, like I said before, that you include gifts in kind, so things that people are going to donate to you. Make sure that if you're asking for money for food, this is just an example, that you've really thought through, do I need to buy that food, or are there congregations or other ministries that could help me buy that food so that I'm spending that money on something else? That's just an example to think about. So spend some time on your budget. Don't just throw some numbers in there. Is your grant sustainable? This doesn't apply to all of them, but if you're asking, for instance, for a leadership grant, and part of that money is going to go towards someone's salary, something that we look for is, what is their plan afterward? Because the worst thing that I see happening over and over again in the church, not just in this ministry, but across the board, is you get some seed money, you get some grant money, you hire somebody, and then the money runs out, and the hoped for money isn't there. So we want to make sure that your grants are sustainable, because we want you to succeed. So this is also something to talk to your bishop about, that if you're doing something like a leadership grant and using that money for some salary, talk to your bishop and see if they have other monies after this runs out that could be applied toward this, toward the salary, or can they help you raise some funds, or what is the next step? So really think that through, because we want to make sure that you succeed. And then at the end, we ask you to think about when your grant, after you've had the grant for a year and you kind of have to report back to us, we ask you to think about how will you evaluate that. So be clear about that and think through. We'll know that we did well with this because we met these markers. Okay? Great. If you are on, make sure that you mute your microphone. Thank you. Grant writing tips. Again, so one of the questions that we look for in our preferences, one of the things that we ask is this something that General Convention has said is important? I don't know all the things General Convention has said is important, and that's where this website comes into play. So if you go to the archives website, you can search all of the old General Convention resolutions. You can search all of the old resolutions that have come from Executive Council. So you can type in a couple of words and those things will pop up. So you can see if you're thinking about doing a gardening ministry, so you might type in creation or stewardship of creation or gardening or whatever it is. Food, food security, whatever that is. Type that into the search. Once you go to the reports of General Convention or the resolves of Council, that's where you'd want to search. Once you search that up, you're going to see all the resolutions will come up. It's kind of fascinating what General Convention has said about things. As a church nerd myself, I sometimes, when I'm thinking through, well, what has the church said is important about this particular topic, I go here and look, because there's some really amazing stuff there, and it tells you where the church's passion has been. Sorry about that. The other thing is make sure that you, if your categories fit into the emphases of the Jesus movement, which is evangelism, reconciliation, or stewardship of creation, make sure you point to that. And just mention, you don't have to go into copious details of how much the Jesus movement means to you, but just say, as our presiding bishop or as General Convention has pointed to us, evangelism is important. And so here's how we're going out into the community to evangelize to young adults. It's done. Just make sure you kind of point to that. So as we're reading them, that we see that sort of marker right there. Finally, if you need to get a hold of us, these are the people. Valerie Harris at the top is the associate for formation. As you are submitting your grants, if you have issues, if FormStack is acting up, if you can't get your document to load, if you load the wrong document, whatever it is, Valerie is there to help you. And I will obviously be there too, but she's the one on the back end making sure that all of the grants are exactly how they should be loaded. Wendy Johnson, who is also on the call and who's been sending out the emails to you guys, is our officer for digital formation and events. She's helping me a lot on the back end. There's me, and then there's Bronwyn Scove, who is the department director for us and the director for youth ministries. She will also, there are always grants that I say, Bronwyn, I need you to read this, because it has to do with sort of the both and ministry that many of us do, young adult ministry and youth ministry, bridging that gap, trying to get people who have been involved in high school, involved in young adult ministry, etc. So this is our team, and I just wanted to show you that so that if you call or email, you have a face to put with a name. And finally, what questions do you have? I'm going to stop sharing screen so I can see people as they talk. But what questions might you have? That was like a whole lot of information in about 25 minutes. So think about it and pop your questions in, and I'm happy to answer them.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
My name's Chad. I'm the chaplain at Arizona State University in Tempe. Um, we are a parish. We're embedded in a parish. So I'm both the chaplain and the vicar for the university parish. And so we use the parish as our sort of base of operations. I'm wondering, in-kind donations, would that be the going rental rate for office space, for meeting area, for studio space, or whatever we use it for? Would that be our criteria? Or can you speak to that?
Yeah, thanks. That's a good question. So as you're thinking about in-kind donation, maybe do a little bit of research. If you had to rent space at the college itself for a meeting room, like what would they charge you? Is there a charge for that? Or what is the going rate? If you had to rent that room to an outside group, what would you charge for it? And just put that in there, because we all know that renting a room, while it's just a room and it's sitting there, it also takes lights and heat and air conditioning, especially where you are, um, to make the place run. It takes someone to come and clean up afterward, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's fair to say, think about the fair rental value. Think about if you had to rent that space at the college, what would that cost you? Great question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Shannon. This is Joseph Loniak from Princeton. Thank you very much for this. It's really helpful. I'm wondering if you have had any applications in recent years that are like multi-campus and therefore multi-diocese and province, and what that's looked like, if you have any pointers about submitting something for three different campuses as one grant.
Yeah, we did a couple years ago from, I think it was the Diocese of North Carolina, submitted a grant. And it was for four different campuses. What I would say there is make sure that, so we also had another one that was like from a diocese, and it was, I think, 7 colleges, right? So that's a lot. So make sure that if you're doing that, that if you're asking to pay someone or to have someone's salary, that it's a doable job, right? Because we all know about the jobs where like it's just way too much work for one person, especially if they're having to drive between locations. So really think that through. If it's about multiple locations doing the same kind of programming, absolutely. You know, there's no reason that you can't do that. If it's about multiple locations coming together for a discernment retreat, absolutely. You know, there's no reason that you can't do that. If you are crossing diocesan boundaries, which is totally fine, just make sure that you have both bishops' buy-in. One of my sayings that I always try to abide by is you don't want a bishop to be surprised, which is why we ask for their signature, because we don't want them to be like, wait, what? Someone in my diocese got a grant? So we don't want them to be surprised that this is happening in their diocese or that you've asked for this money. So I will say that. Did that answer your question?
Yes, indeed. And does it make sense to have one of the applicants be the lead and then therefore submit it on behalf of all three?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So that's another thing that we have to have is we can't write the check to an individual, obviously, and we have to have one person and therefore one entity who we send the money to, and they're the ones then at the end that have to report back into our finance office. So whoever that person is going to be, so for instance, Joseph, if it's you, you want to submit the application, and in the application we say, if you get this, who do we send the check to, essentially. So make sure that you are clear on that, because there's been a whole lot of confusion about that in the past. Yeah. Another thing that I want to, that this question has made me think of, I did this presentation for Province 4, and one of the questions there is, can I as an institution or a ministry apply for both a leadership grant and a young adult ministry grant? And the answer is yes. You may not, probably won't get both of them. But in the past, we've had people who have said, I have this big idea and I want to do the leadership grant, And I also know that that's really hard to get because they don't give out a bunch of those. So I'm going to also apply for this a smaller grant and whittle down my expectations, whittle down my idea. And maybe that smaller idea begins the bigger idea. So you can do that. Just know that you probably won't get both of them because we would try to spread out the money that we give. Yeah. Other questions?
Hi, Shannon. It's
Yeah.
Josh.
Hey, Josh.
Hi, at Western Washington University in Bellingham, Washington. Thank you, first of all, for all of these tips and tools. This is immensely helpful. And I think most of all, just the expectation of a discernment process prior to applying is a really good thing, certainly to remind me of. The situation I find myself in is that we've had a really good thing going here for a few years, but that while the college students have gotten more and more involved in the parish, there have been fewer and fewer parishioners actively involved in the campus ministry. So I find myself being sort of a solo agent with the students when I go to campus. I want to change that because I think that's a step to make things more sustainable. I hope this isn't too roundabout a way of asking this question. This call is enough to help me discern that we're not ready to apply for a big grant. We don't have a direction. We need a direction. I don't have a group of people to help us find that direction yet. Would it be advisable, would it be foolhardy, to ask for a smaller grant as a stopgap measure that has no more glorious ambitions than just to keep our budget going for another year while we organize for discernment for the long term and sustainability?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say that there are grants that we've given money to that aren't very sexy. Like someone literally needed to build an alumni database because no one had kept track for years and years and years. And part of what that allowed that ministry to do was then do some of their own fundraising. So it doesn't always have to be for, you know, a glamorous pilgrimage or starting a completely new thing. Sometimes we need the money to say, we need money to help us focus and discern. Maybe your parish and the people that you're trying to pull together need to go on a retreat with the campus, with the college students, and all begin to be in relationship with each other. While that doesn't need to cost a lot of money, it does cost some money. We all know that. So absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Hi, hello.
Hi.
Hi, so this is Ameya. I'm calling in from Houghton, Michigan. I'm representing the Canterbury House Campus Ministry here. I had a question regarding the terminology used in those bullet points right there. One of it says that the leadership grant is to re-energize a current campus ministry. And what we were thinking, we've had some thoughts with the discernment process with some of the members here. What we are thinking is we want to enhance our current situation, and we are not really re-energizing. So I was wondering if applying for a leadership grant would be appropriate. We have certain track record which has shown that a student leader can do these things, but that particular student is graduating soon, and he did it completely on a volunteer basis. But looking at the amount of work that he has put in, does not seem like anyone else would love to do it just on a volunteer basis. So I was just wondering if the leadership grants are applicable for students, and also wanted to know how stringent you are with respect to the specific terminology that are used.
Thank you. As we were writing the descriptions of what the grants were, I'll just say that we went through many adjectives. Like what is the thing to describe what we're telling people to do? So re-energizing is one, enhancing, sort of giving it that oomph that it needs to either go to the next level, or in your case, really get someone to take on the ministry that's been volunteer, and that person's leaving. So how do you then really reform what's been doing and think about it differently? Because as we know, as soon as leadership changes, new people start to get new ideas. And so that's going to be, I'm assuming, part of it for you too. So yeah,
Yeah.
you can apply for the leadership grant with that in mind. Mhm.
Okay, thank you. That helps a lot.
Yeah. Other questions?
I have one of the very simplest of questions, I hope.
Yeah,
Who are young adults?
it's a great question. My office defines them as 18 to 30-year-olds. I know, and that is just because that's how the church defines it. I know for a fact that there are many 20s and 30s groups, so they might go up to 39. They might go up to 42. That's okay, right? We define it as 18 to 30 because we had to have some sort of stopping point, and that's been the case for years and years and years. If you want to sort of delve into it, there's a great book on it's about young adults. I'll put it in the notes. It is about, I'm blanking on the word, but it's about not just young adults. It's about what are they growing into, right? So you kind of think about young adulthood in the United States is transitioning from being a teenager to like when you have a job or maybe a family or kids or like you have your own first bank account or whatever that thing is, right? We're kind of growing into what society expects us to do as an adult. So how does that look in your community? That's up for you to decide. Young adults are not 50-year-olds, right? So, but that 30 to 40-ish kind of, depending on how your particular context is kind of wiggly right there. Yeah.
Hi, Shannon.
Hey, how are you, Ralph?
Good. I have a question. You answered a lot of the questions that I had before when we got to meet in Province 4,
Mhm.
but I was just curious about this meeting. I know I have a few people that wanted to attend but couldn't. Is there? I know you're going to send notes along with the slideshow, but is it going to be? Are you going to send the actual presentation that you did as well?
Yeah, we are recording this, and so
Okay.
this will
Yeah, I
be
saw that.
edited and put up for anyone to be able to watch. Because there were a lot of people. I had a situation last week that I couldn't get out of, and it kind of was at the last minute. So that's why we had the date change, and there were a number of people who said, I can't make that. So we are recording it. It will be up, and that way you can also send it to people. You can send it to the people you're doing discernment with and say, check this out. What do you think? So that will be posted. Wendy and I will work on getting that out before Christmas, hopefully, if not right after the New Year.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions?
One more. As I think about possibilities, I'm not ready this year. Is it safe to say that the next year will probably be a similar process and a similar time frame? So that as we discern, this might be the jumping off point over the next year to process what we want to accomplish.
Yeah. Yes. The process, I'm assuming, will be pretty much the same. Because we start a new triennium in 2019, we're assuming that we'll have the same money because we're asking for the same amount of money. But that will be up to General Convention. So money-wise, I'm not 100% sure. We might have more, we might have less. But I don't see them completely going away. The process will be very similar. The timing might be moved up a little bit. So they might be due in like November or December because Executive Council has to vote on them. And so depending on when they meet, we have to then back it up so that we can have the applications and the reading and that whole process. So just keep your eyes and ears open. It will be obviously on our Facebook pages, and we are restarting our newsletter. So we'll make sure that you guys have the link to sign up for that if you're not already signed up, so that you'll get in your inbox, here's the process and here's what it looks like for this year. Great question. Anything else? if as you're doing discernment or as you're writing, you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out and ask. Email is the best way to get me because I'm on the road a lot and in meetings like this a lot. So email so that we can schedule a time to chat. And even if you think that it's insignificant or you think it's a stupid question, it's okay. I'm here to help you guys try to figure this out. I am also going to send in the email in the follow-up from this who your provincial contact person is. Each province has a coordinator that serves on my council of advice. And so they will not be reading your grants. So it's really safe and they all know the process. They've all read grants. They've all kind of been through this. There's one that's new, but he's catching on quickly. So make sure you can reach out to them and say, okay, I've never done this before, or is this what you mean? Or here's another question I got. I don't have a bishop right now because the bishop left and the provisional bishop won't be here yet. In that case, you can have like a standing committee member sign it or something. We just want to make sure that someone within the diocese knows that you're applying for some money. So those kinds of questions, it's easy to reach out to me, send me an email, and just don't hesitate to do that. I'm here for that, and so are your provincial folks. And if you know other people that have applied for grants in the past, reach out to them too. It's a good group of folks to think about reaching out to. Great. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I hope you guys all have an extremely happy continuing Advent season and a wonderful Christmas and hopefully a little bit of a break. I know a lot of us that are both doing campus ministry or young adult ministry and parish ministry, you don't get much of a break, but I hope you get a little bit. Like I said, if you need to reach out and ask any other questions, don't hesitate with that.